I don't think that modern medicine really does a deep dive into the intricate levels of somebody's metabolic health or their heart disease risk or their hormones. People are lacking that access. Ones that are hitting that 40-year-old age limit, maybe put off their health for 10 years, chasing a career or raising kids, but they start to demand this information and they can't find it anywhere.
Welcome to the show where we help you make smart nutrition simple. If you want proven nutrition strategies to help you build a better body and create the energy to show up for your family without overly restrictive and unrealistic dieting, then you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and enjoy this episode. Optimal health isn't just about living longer, it's about living better. On today's episode of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show, I had the distinct honor of speaking with Dr. Jesse Greer. Dr. Greer's career has taken him from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center to the front lines as a battalion surgeon for the U.S. Special Forces in Afghanistan. Now out of the military, Dr. Greer opened Preamble, a healthspan clinic in Scottsdale where he uses cutting-edge technology to provide patients with a preventative and personalized plan of attack to take control of their health. In our conversation, Dr. Greer shares his experience as a Green Beret and the medical challenges that he experienced with soldiers on the battlefield. We talk about the transition from working in an Army hospital to a civilian ER, the issues with our current healthcare system, and the challenges he faced when his concrete mission as a military doctor ended. We discuss metabolic derangement, the significance of fasting insulin levels, and why it's crucial to take ownership over your health. Finally, Dr. Greer explains the concept of Medicine 3.0, his approach to patient care, and how he leverages data and technology for proactive health management. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Jesse Greer. Welcome to the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show, man. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I am excited to introduce you to our audience. We've been connecting as of late. You're here in Scottsdale with me. I think we are really speaking the same language and we were able to connect a while back. And so I wanted to bring you in front of our audience, share some of your knowledge and wisdom and how you're kind of doing things differently in the field of medicine. Maybe just give us a little rundown of your background and how you got to become this, the physician that in the position that you're in right now.
Yeah, of course. I went and did medical school through the military. I did my training at Walter Reed, and then I was an Army doctor for a while. I went out to go be a battalion surgeon for 7th Special Forces Group. So I was a doctor for an elite unit of individuals, and we got to do all the cool stuff and tactical medicine. And
I'm fascinated, and I'm confident that other people are fascinated. So I don't want you to skim over this stuff because you seem like a pretty badass dude. You were a Green Beret and a battalion surgeon. So could you dive a little bit into, like, first and foremost, like how did you get into the route that you did with special forces, with medicine? What was the preempt to that?
Oh yeah, for sure. When I was finishing up my college, it was right at the time, 9/11 happened. We were invading Iraq, and I really just wanted, to go serve. And the route was either to go, straight into the military from college as an officer, but I also was really interested in medicine at the time, and I discovered that the military has its own medical school out in Washington D.C. And I was like, oh, that's a great, that's kind of a great combination of things that I want to do. So it was a pretty easy decision for me to do that. But then, it's a normal medical school. It's a normal residency. So, even though I wore a uniform to school, you still just go to medical school for 4 years and start working in the hospital. And I did an internal medicine residency at Walter Reed. And that was great, but it just really wasn't satisfying any of that kind of urge to go out and go out with the real army.
Were you into like combat? Were you into martial arts? Were you into weapons prior?
No, I mean, but I was into sports,
Right.
but I wasn't like and I liked like World War II history and things like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't do ROTC. I wasn't really a military guy. It's funny. I look back, all the men that I knew growing up as a kid had served in the Army.
Mm.
So I just thought that that's kind of what you do when you get older. You just like you eventually end up in the army doing
Yeah.
something, you know. So it just kind of it was just it seemed like a pretty normal thing to do. And then especially when things were the way they were in 2001 through then, you
Right.
know, you're like kicking the pants.
Totally.
Uh, I was spending spring break in Miami, you know, and you're seeing news footage of people younger than you going off to war, kind of
Yeah.
sunk in pretty quick.
Yeah. I was right there. I mean, we both went to U of A, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So dude, same time. I mean, I think I was a junior, sophomore or junior in college. And so I remember it vividly. So you went to medical school, you went to Walter Reed Medical School, and then take us from there.
Yeah, and then you know, I got this opportunity. I wanted to go out to the army immediately after my residency, and you can like everybody gets to if they want to, you know. But I just really, you know, had this desire to kind of go work for, you know, dudes who got after it a little bit more. So, you know, the idea of I met a couple guys who had actually been special forces battalion surgeons for, you know, 4 or 5 years, come back. They were working in the hospital, and you know, talking to those guys, they were like they were dead back in the hospital, and they just were like, I just want to go back to
Mm.
being a special forces doctor. And
Because
I
it
was
was
like,
like
oh, that
so
sounds
boring in the hospital.
exactly right. And they were just like, and I was doing cool shit. I was jumping out of airplanes, and you know, we were you know, doing training on animals, and showing these dudes how to save lives, and you know, going all over the world. And you're just like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I'd like to do that. So I mean, funny story. You know, and I had no connections in the space, but I found out where they have their annual conference, and I found the dude who actually assigns these jobs. I found out where he was, you know, having drinks after the conference one day, and just, you know, went up and kind of gave him my pitch. And, you know, he was like, I guess he felt bad enough for me or whatever, you know, or felt sorry enough for me anyway. So he's like, okay, I'll give you a job on one of our, like, not with the special forces, but you guys will support them. And it was a special operations support team, and you'll be the doctor on that. And that was a cool experience. So that's what I did right out of residency. And it was this 8-man trauma team, and we would deploy with 12-man special forces teams pretty far forward. We'd be able to provide, you know, life sustaining care for 2-3 days out in the field, and that was our job. And we went, you know, all over the world: Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Central Africa for 6 months, and you get to really kind of practice this stuff. And you know, I did a good enough job at that, you know, for that assignment, that I got the opportunity to go take a battalion surgeon slot. And so I was talking to the boss, and he was like, would you go through the special forces training school, you know, if you had the chance? Because I've got an opportunity to send a doctor through every year. And I didn't want to seem like a wuss, like, at the time. So of course I said yes, you know.
What were you saying in your mind?
Well, I was just like, oh, it sounds fucking hard. Like, you know,
Totally.
I'm in decent shape, but like shit, like I didn't know, like I didn't come here to this conversation expecting to ask if I wanted to go through special forces school, like, you know. But he was like, you'd be fourth or fifth on the list anyway, so chances are you wouldn't get to. So I was like, okay, sure, yes, I've got zero
Chances are
risk.
you wouldn't end up deploying.
Chances are I wouldn't end up getting to go to the special forces school, because there was like
Oh,
four
okay.
doctors in front of me in line to try to do this.
Got
And
it.
you know, turns out, you know, you have to go through this 3 week, they call it special forces assessment and selection. You go through this 3 week period where, you know, like hell week, and you know, where you've got to pass all their tests. And then if you get selected at the end of that, then you get to go through the special forces qualification course, which is like a year and a half, where
Yeah.
you become a Green Beret. But apparently all those docs didn't pass the selection. So about, you know, 6 months later, I got a call, and they're like, all right, I'll be ready to go.
How hard
Uh,
was it?
the qualification course, that first 3 weeks, it was brutal. I was in good shape, but like, I mean, I didn't really have any very much military experience kind of doing all that stuff. And you got to do these complicated land navigation courses. And so, you know, I was working from a deficit, but they give great courses for these beforehand. So I was just sitting in the front taking notes. And then just, I think I did get a heat injury one day. But I just happened to have this unexpected, like 2-3 hour break afterwards, where I was able to kind of recover. You know, I would have been failed out from there, but just, kind of managed to make it through and then get selected. So then stopped being a doctor for a whole year and a half and went through the special forces course, becoming an officer.
So you made it through. So that sort of like qualified you to become a Green Beret.
Yeah. And then after you go through that course for about a year and a half, at the end, you become a Green Beret, and they finally, give you one. So it took me about a year and a half.
So tell us about your responsibilities, because you've told me previously, and you mentioned here, just a couple of minutes ago that, you were serving with this elite team and you guys had kind of a lot of resources to work with. Like, what were your daily responsibilities, and fill us in on some of those things?
The responsibilities as a doctor for the like as a battalion surgeon, right? You're responsible for all the training of every medic that falls underneath you. Every special forces team has a couple medics on there. They're all highly trained. They've already gone through school, but you do recurrent training with them. Your main job is support to the command to provide, medical insights into all the operations and missions that you're doing, planning medical evacuations,
Yeah.
Coordinating all that stuff. But you also are in charge of the health of your unit as well. And, so a lot of the times when you're back in garrison, which is, you hope to be more times than not, but, you're around and you're dealing with the health of your unit. And if you're somebody that they can trust, and if you're somebody they like talking to, then, there's always people kind of walking in and coming in and talking to you. And, we'd been at war for, 20 years, and a lot of those dudes had been too, 10, 15.
Yeah.
So we end up seeing a lot of PTSD, a lot of depression, a lot of, too many suicides. Like this was just kind of a common theme, especially among the older guys. The guys were kind of getting into their 40s, which is also kind of this time that if we're not careful about it, right, we start putting on that weight and start getting a bit metabolically unhealthy. Next thing you know, they've got sleep apnea, and you've just got all these things kind of compounding together, and it's just wasn't a very pretty picture. We did have more resources, so we had like a full SEC style college football team gym, with our own trainers, and we had access to nutritionists, and so that was a great resource for us that we were able to use in this program that I started working with them on.
So you guys were leveraging, you're obviously doing strength training, you were managing nutrition. What kind of health markers were you looking at with your guys? What were some of the tools that you were leveraging at that time to focus on their optimal health?
And the biggest thing that we would see with these guys, besides this kind of like pre-diabetes or this poor metabolic health, was a lot of hormone issues. And I got started down this program because, I heard a guy talking about how a lot of these high explosive injuries, head injuries really disrupt that hormonal axis, kind of starting from the brain.
Yeah.
And, that's true. We would find like really extremely low testosterone levels, like, you'd call them low in a 70-year-old man, on these, barrel chested freedom fighters who, probably feels optimal, and had this high level of testosterone all of his life. And like, there's no wonder he's crying at Dove commercials.
Yeah, and I've seen this before, but with all of the explosives and head trauma and stuff, so what you're saying is it disrupts this HP axis and all the downstream hormones that are facilitated through that. And so you get a lot of guys, I imagine, that are then suffering from low testosterone levels and everything that comes from that.
Yep, that's exactly right.
What were some of the ways in which you were helping guys through this? What were some of the big takeaways that you leveraged through working in special forces that you've taken with you and leveraged into, your existing practice?
Yeah, well, the simplicity of being able to make that diagnosis and then start treatment, having immediate access to them for, follow-up labs to be able to track this stuff, was super easy. I mean, that made it all like totally doable. But the nice thing is that, you're in the Army, so you got to fucking report to work. I'm sorry,
No, you're
work every
fine.
day.
You're good.
But I start talking about the Army, maybe more cuss words accidentally slip out.
Quite all right.
But you have to show up to work every day, right? So you've got a place to be. And when people are having this level of issues, the command was really supportive of making this a priority for these guys, right? So they did have to report to like the nutritionist and these gym sessions and so while we're implementing these hormones, and we're able to start pecking away at the crappy things in their diet and focusing on their exercise. I mean, you almost didn't have to be too selective about the exercise. Just even getting them moving and all that stuff was just the right thing. But also addressing these guys' sleep. I probably threw half of them on CPAPs for sleep apnea.
Yeah.
At least until they could lose some weight, and that really helped as well.
Outside of the PTSD, I imagine many of the the levels of metabolic derangement that you were starting to see with these guys, especially as they started to get older or later in their careers, are the very same things that you're seeing with your existing clients.
That's exactly right. They're obviously not the same background, but a lot of the clients that we have were athletic in their younger years, and same type of mindset. But that's exactly, we just kind of leveraged that access to what we had then, repeat it here, and deliver it in a similar way.
What did your transition out of the military look like? And I know that you got frustrated with kind of aspects of conventional medicine. So I'd love for you to share just that transition, and then of course going into your own, business as it stands.
When I left the Army, I went to go work at a civilian hospital, and it was nice, right? They're paying double of whatever I was making in the Army. So good financial opportunity. And that's what I was qualified to do. Might as well take it. And started working as a hospital doctor there. So that means, anybody who's comes in the emergency room and they're too sick to leave, they've got to stay in the hospital, right? So the doctor comes down and takes them in and manages their care and until they leave the hospital. That's what I did. And it was just, man, it was a giant slap in the face of like, going from that job to the civilian side of things in so many ways, right? Yeah, it was a transition into the civilian world, and no matter how much they tell you, like it's a shock to the system and try to prep you for it, you still got to run through it mentally. But just that being my day to day, the business side of that hospital, right? Of them kind of overriding your decision making capacity so that it follows along this neat little algorithm that someone found is going to drop 4% off the cost of this stuff. That wiggles its way into everything that you're doing, right? So your decision making is almost like completely co-opted, and they're basically just renting your medical license to be able to push people through the hospital. So that, and then just the level of like, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic 80% of the time, where you've got somebody who's going to be there in 2 weeks, because either they don't give a shit or the system is completely screwed to be able to prevent this from happening. And you're just like, what sort of long-term difference is this really making? And it just highlighted the difference between the two jobs that I had, and having satisfaction in one and not in the other, and then just going, why don't I just go back and do the thing that I like to do?
What does that look like now?
Yeah, so it looked like starting a business. So that was good. I did a whole year of business school. I did not finish it because we started the business, and I really haven't had time to go back. But just to learn a little bit of civilian language, the childlike view of how the world works, how anything is done. I have no idea what job titles mean, or had, like you're just like, you feel almost like institutionalized, like you were in prison the whole, for the last 20 years. And so that was good little context, and then got into starting this clinic.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, like that seems like a really significant transition. Years, your career in the military, and then going into that environment, and now obviously like starting a business, it seems significant.
Yeah, I mean, if I could isolate it to one thing, it's that it's that loss of a mission. When you don't have to struggle for finding a personal mission because, one is worthy and handed to you, like, you don't realize how big of a gift that is.
Hmm.
And so I think kind of leaving that, and then for the first time just being like, oh, nobody told you you're in charge of your mission now,
Right.
and so that gives you all this existential angst because you have no clue that that's what it is, right? So just kind of manifest like that until you wiggle through it enough, hopefully to figure out that that's what it was.
Your company is called Preamble Health. Like, what does that mean?
Health in general, or healthcare, is it's such a word that it brings so many different things to our mind, right? But most of all, it really starts once we get sick, so what you're doing for healthcare after something happens. And that's why we like the name Preamble, because it totally neglects that your health was around and needed to be attended to those 40-50 years before you got sick, right? And I'm not talking about new age crazy medications. I'm talking about those core tenets of your health, which were your ability to move around, your mental health, how moderate you were with your eating, right? And that's that kind of preamble to what your health is that gets ignored, and especially when you just refer to healthcare as what happens after you're sick. So
100%.
Kind of getting it, yeah.
And so, how are you guys addressing healthcare? How are you functioning in the healthcare space in a different way than perhaps where general medicine is?
Where we start with all of our patients is getting this, honest assessment up front of where they stand with the key aspects of their longevity and their health span. So, I don't think that modern medicine really does a deep dive into the intricate levels of somebody's metabolic health or their heart disease risk or their hormones. So I just found that that's what's lacking in people are lacking that access. Ones that are hitting that 40-year-old age limit, realizing their mortality is a real thing. Maybe put off their health for 10 years, chasing a career or raising kids. But they start to demand this information and they can't find it anywhere. And their PCMs don't really give that. So being able to give that, being a place where people can come get access to all this, the newest tech, but be able to get that honest assessment is where we start with these folks. And some folks will realize that they need to actually do that. They need to do a lot to get to where they want to go. And they need help getting there. And then that's kind of the next phase with the patients that continue with us.
Hey guys, I want to interrupt this conversation briefly with an exciting announcement. If you're a father and struggling to lose the pounds that have crept on over the years, I understand your challenge. You're juggling a successful career, a loving family, and now you're looking to regain that energy and physique that seems to have slipped away. And that's exactly why I created Prime Fit Operating System. Prime Fit OS is a unique hybrid coaching program designed specifically for men like you. Now, you guys know me, we're not about quick fixes or impossible routines. Instead, we focus on real sustainable change through personalized nutrition and science-driven strength training, all wrapped up in a supportive community with expert guidance directly from me and my 20 years of experience working with men just like you. Imagine mastering your nutrition without restrictive dieting, getting stronger and leaner, and boosting your overall energy, all without overwhelming your already busy schedule. With Prime Fit OS, you're getting more than just a cookie-cutter nutrition and fitness plan. You're embarking on a transformative journey that fits into your life, not the other way around. So, if you're ready to take the first step towards a healthier, leaner, stronger, more energetic, confident, ass-kicking you, join us over at Prime Fit Operating System. Trust me, guys, your family, your career, and most importantly, you will thank you for it. So if you guys are interested in getting started and want to find out more about the program, let's chat. Just head over to primefitos.com/call and grab a time on my calendar. Remember, it's your time to be at your prime. I think you and I would both agree that for someone to get healthy, for someone to want to get healthy, for someone to maintain their health over a long period of time and live a long, healthy lifestyle, there probably needs to be a element of having a mission, having a purpose at play. How do you navigate that, or do you navigate that with your clients? I read that you call your practice in some capacity medicine 3.0. So I'd like to dive into that and some of the logistics, but obviously there is the element of mindset, of mission, of purpose. How do you navigate that with clients?
That's the hardest thing to touch on, or get people to kind of think about. I think a lot of people inherently want to figure that out and are kind of struggling of that. They know that it's this fundamental, or this underlying fundamental question that they need to answer for themselves. So how do you address that in this whole aspect of things when you're kind of showing them their health? It's hard. I try to, I guess, instill it more, or weave it in more with the voice and of how we're kind of thinking about these problems and going about this. But yeah, it's a tough thing to do. So I think that's kind of my solution for now. But you're right. It could be a whole year worth of work on it. So
Easily. And it's not
yeah.
an easy question to answer. And I think you, navigated it well, but in my experience, it's either you've got someone who is highly driven and they have a very clear purpose and mission for what they want to accomplish in their life. And maybe they're a business owner or just, hard charging executive or whatever it is, that they know what they want to accomplish. They know why they want to accomplish it. And I think it makes things a heck of a lot easier. And then we have people who sort of stumble their way through the process, some more successful than others, but invariably at some point along the way, they can't not come to the realization that their existing behaviors, their habits, their choices, the people they surround themselves with ultimately are not in line with what it is that they really want. And they're forced to acknowledge that.
Well, it's when the student is ready, right?
Yeah.
And you never know how long it's going to take for the student to actually be ready, for sure. Yeah.
And those are the tough ones, because then it's like, wow, my whole life is built around things that don't resonate with what I envision my purpose is, maybe my spouse, my friends, my career,
Yes.
right? All of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Realizing that, I mean, why would you want to look into that? That's a big load of cobwebs that you're going to have to parse through, and it's not going to feel good. So
That's a
yeah.
great point. Why would you want to? And so people intentionally just sort of ignoring. It's like, okay, I don't need to. If I can't, really see it, I'm just going to ignore that right there. And meanwhile, they're going to stay stuck as long as they do. Those are the tough conversations. How do
Yeah.
you guys leverage technology to help your clients make decisions that are in their best interest?
We do it several ways. One level it works on, at least in the beginning too, is some level of accountability. But if we're helping somebody who has some metabolic derangements, we'll often use continuous glucose monitors on them that we're kind of getting feeds into,
Yeah.
and able to help them dial in some specific issues. It's those are always fun if you can learn enough on them to then try to beat the game, so to speak, or maintain some
Right.
good blood sugar levels.
Let's talk metabolic derangement. So like,
Sure.
what is that, for the general listener, like, what are we looking at? What are you primarily looking at when someone comes in? You've got a middle-aged male, they're coming in, maybe have a little more body fat. They know something's up. You guys are running blood work. How do we determine that someone has quote unquote metabolic derangement?
I hate the word metabolic health, or just like, I mean, because it's great to describe the entirety of everything that's going on, right? But
Yeah.
I think it loses a lot of people, and it's definitely not sexy, right? But
Right.
I think for 80% purposes, what we're talking about with this metabolic health is really some of their blood sugar control and their insulin, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you get this accumulation of all these extra waste products and your fat and inflammatory markers and elevated cholesterol markers that are all part of this syndrome. But if we can boil it down to something a bit more simple, we're really looking into this blood sugar control and where they fall on this spectrum of finely tuned athlete to diabetes.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that checkpoint of diabetes and pre-diabetes. But even if they're up to that border and right up against it, like they're in this green zone, or it's
Right.
nothing to be worried about.
Right.
And what I don't think a lot of people realize is that there's this big swath of kind of like yellow warning and actual increased risk before you get up to that pre-diabetes. And all the statistics of how many cases of pre-diabetes there are in America now, some like crazy, over a third of, or whatever.
It's
But
outrageous.
but if you look at the average American and you come in, you take them and you do a little bit of deeper dive, like looking at what their fasting insulin levels are,
Right.
or you do these other like kind of shitty tests like an A1C, which is often a lot of people and is not too useful. But if you're able to actually assess how somebody's blood sugar levels move throughout the day as they eat, you're able to get a much more accurate picture of what their average sugar is. Right. So kind of where they fall a little bit closer on that diabetes spectrum. You're seeing how high it's spiking and how and just whether it's moving like a healthy person's sugar moves, or if it's moving like, the wheels are starting to get wobbly.
Yeah.
So that's really the main thing that we'll be looking at for metabolic health. I mean, of course, we'll look at, visceral fat and, inflammatory markers that come from that, but the outcome really isn't any different, and that you're going to address that with diet and exercise. And should you do that, all that stuff is going to really improve. I mean, there's some supplements you can take for certain things, but other than that, like, that's the solution, right?
But what sounds like a differentiating factor is you're actually helping the client become more aware of their behaviors, their eating habits, why this stuff is problematic, obviously infusing physical activity, and not just handing them a pill or saying, you're quote unquote pre-diabetic. So like, you're not there yet. We'll just kind of wait and see until things get outside the norms.
That's exactly right. That's why most people are kind of confused after their annual check-ins. They're like, some things were kind of bad or like not that good, but I guess I'm okay. I don't know, but like, yeah, you need a finer tuned look into kind of, where you stand from that. And we'll go heavy with the technology with like the, the wearables and like the CGMs or, monitoring sleep up front. But, what we're really trying to do, I don't think you should be on that all the time, right? That's, you can't be that insane about being on top of your health sustainably, like years into the future. But these short periods of time where you can do that, and kind of mimic what right looks like, having somebody beat the game on a CGM and feel different after 7 days, and just having this a little bit of muscle memory that they gain maybe from how they should be eating,
Right.
How much they, or how hard they should be moving at certain times for their exercise. Maybe they were underdoing, and it just mimics this stuff. You take that with you, and sometimes you need to come back and do that again, and it helps. But that's how we leverage technology, and we try to do it heavy at certain areas. But other than that, I mean, you also got to enjoy the view, right? So you can't go too crazy with stuff. Yeah.
No, but I think that's something that in early conversations, I think you and I really connected around leveraging data to help us make informed decisions. And one of the things that I appreciated about your guys' approach is because you're sort of forcing that level of awareness with your patients and saying, listen, if you can see the impact of the foods that you eat, I think it hits on a different level. And if you can see, and make sense of what's going on with body composition and visceral body fat and why that is so dangerous for you, if you can just have a little more input into your physical activity levels, your sleep quality, hence, the wearables you said, like a Whoop strap or an Oura ring or whatever, is just get a more complex understanding of how things are impacting you so that you can actually be in control, so that you can actually act like you're the responsible adult that you are, because we don't I think one of the things about conventional medicine is we don't empower people to show up for themselves, as we give them these nebulous pieces of information of eat less and exercise more. And it's like, good luck. Like, we
Yeah,
don't know where to go. So it
well,
sounds
you're
like
right.
your guys' plan is a little, certainly more comprehensive in that aspect, certainly more tailored and guided to the individual.
For sure, people do need a point in the right direction, but what you said is completely right. I mean, even all my patients, like, tell them to do not abdicate responsibility, right, to me, uh, for your health, right? We can show you this stuff, but this then needs to be carried on, right? No, nobody's gonna be there to save you.
So what's the typical trajectory look like? Obviously, you're heavy in the, assessment and data early on to come up with a plan of attack. What's the typical trajectory look like for someone?
Some folks come in here in really good shape, and maybe we'll spend, or we'll actually go a little bit more into some optimizing of them. But an average person would come in here, and we would do a good screen into their metabolic health, key risk factors, especially for cardiovascular disease. Look into their hormones, sex hormones, thyroid hormones, and into their inflammation. But usually, we'll prioritize that metabolic health and portion of the plan following there. And we'll have a 3-month program where we're working heavy with them, doing this, getting things in line. It will check in with them again, usually around month 4, something like that. And that's where we'll go. We'll see the progress we made, see if we need to make any adjustments. But we're also taking deeper dives into more into their risk. So this is where I find it's usually really helpful to take a deeper dive into their cardiovascular risk. The first time they come in here, and we'll talk about their cholesterol and inflammation, but that just, I don't know, it doesn't land. People don't have strong opinions on these aspects of the number one killer, right? Especially with regards to cholesterol, because there's just so much information out there. And they hear a bunch of stuff, and so you just kind of go, oh, well, I'm just going to not really do much, or I don't have an opinion on it because it's kind of hard to figure it out.
Right.
So we'll do a deeper dive with more advanced imaging, like a calcium scan,
Yeah.
so that if somebody is up in the air, or they're just really hesitant about getting their getting their risk factors in line, you can show them. You can say, hopefully not, but hey, there's a lot of disease here, and we really need to get after this, and these are the things we need to address. Or hey, you know what, we did a CTA of your coronary arteries, and there's no soft plaque, there's no hard plaque. Your cholesterol looks like shit, and you don't want to do anything about it, but like, what can I say? Like, I mean, it looks good, like, I mean, like, you would be that person who could reasonably do that now that right? So
Yeah.
but I think that's a conversation that usually takes a little while to kind of get through, to see if we need to set a goal, and if we do, what it is.
Do you guys run any genetic testing? Is that something that can be beneficial for people to start thinking about when it comes to preventative healthcare?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's something we'll also kind of dive into over the months. But once you understand your cardiovascular risk, it's what are those other things that are going to kill you? And there's some genetic testing components of that are super useful. One, to see if there's any high risk mutations that put you at increased risk for certain types of cancer. Maybe you need to adjust your cancer screening strategy. Are there any things that put you at increased risk for dementia? There's some genetic markers that can help tell if you have more cardiovascular risk.
Yeah.
There's not too many. I mean, there's a few handfuls, or a handful or two of useful genetic tests, but I think those are probably, if you're looking at, like, you can go overboard with all this type of data and genetic testing and things like that. But if you're looking for this, concentrated, like, majority of usefulness out of there, it is helpful, and we do it as well.
So let's take, for example, a middle-aged, male or female. Let's just say male, for example, 45 or 50 years old. We're generally, quote unquote, healthy, meaning whenever we get blood work, things are normal per conventional guidelines. We generally feel okay. That doesn't need to necessarily seem to be any overt level of concern that's, prevalent. But we want to take the steps to really dig a little bit deeper, make sure that we're looking under the hood and getting a true idea of if there's anything that we do need to be concerned about, what are like the 3 or 4 things that are probably of most importance that someone should look into or concern themselves right out of the gate?
You could probably break that up into a couple categories, but first I would start with knowing if you're at any increased risk of certain things that you should be concerned about, right? Something that whether you're at an abnormal high risk of heart attack or some of these genetic markers that may show that you have increased risk of cancer. But like, do you have any abnormal risks that apply to you that you specifically need to worry about? Because maybe they'll fall in 1 in 5 people. So you should have these one-time tests to figure some of that stuff out, right? But as far as the assessing where you stand with these key aspects of your health, understanding how well your blood sugar and insulin systems are working, where you fall on a scale for your metabolic health is super important as well.
You implied that looking at hemoglobin A1Cs and just fasting blood sugar is not enough. So do we need to be looking at then fasting insulin as well?
Yeah, I think fasting insulin is super important. It gives you a direction. I know it can still be quasi-normal and a bit misleading, but it's a simple test that tells you a lot about whether or not that insulin resistance is beginning, and whether or not you're starting to move a little bit to the right on the poor blood sugar control scale.
Can we also see that there's normal blood sugar or normal A1Cs, yet high level of insulin resistance?
Oh yeah. We see that. We see that pretty often. The A1C that starts for prediabetes starts at 5.7.
Right.
But we just see a lot of folks coming in here, in the like around 5.4 or 5.5. Well, you would not normally not get a fasting insulin level with your regular checkup, which
Right.
is pretty simple. It's kind of silly that they don't do that. But these, when we check it, sometimes it's coming back in the 20s. And then when you're able to actually put a continuous glucose monitor on them and you see how much activity is there, kind of that wobbly wheel, high spikes, a lot of variability in their spikes and a high average sugar, it was completely missed by just
Right.
the A1C. And of course their fasting glucose was 89,
Right.
it looked normal on the lab.
That's something I'm seeing more and more. And maybe it's just because we're looking, but it's something we're seeing more and more with clients who have a hard time losing weight, losing body fat. And I think it lends itself to this level of metabolic dysfunction. What are maybe 1 or 2 strategies that you guys employ to help clients re-regulate, get better insulin control once you have an idea of what's going on with blood sugar?
We don't really have too many thoughts on people's carbohydrate intakes until they demonstrate this level of poor blood sugar control. So, usually starting with a reasonable restriction on carbohydrates or some type of, active altering of their diet using a CGM to see how their blood sugar responds to this type of stuff is important. I do love a fast, at least starting with a 24-hour fast, and seeing how people respond to those. I think those are decent to sprinkle in on folks, but usually it's concentrating a lot more on increasing those aerobic hours of exercise too.
Yeah. So, okay, few things there. So perhaps there's lowering carbohydrate intake. You said a prolonged fast, and then ramping up physical activity levels. And are we talking about just generally walking, or we're talking about more zone 2 cardio?
Yeah, I mean, depending on where somebody is kind of in their in their phase of adopting an exercise plan, obviously walking's great. And if you can get a whoop on them and get them recording their heart rate during those walks, next time you talk to them, you can kind of show them where your goal is, and maybe put a weight vest on them, or get them walking on an incline or something like that. But if somebody knows and somebody's moving around, maybe they're doing too much high intensity exercise all the time, then you can go a little bit more to the straight to that zone 2 discussion where they're gonna understand it a lot better.
Love it. No, it's super helpful, and it's refreshing to hear, especially given frustrations with conventional medicine. And I think for people just wanting to know, to have a doctor who's actually giving them guidance around nutrition, around exercise, around supplementation, and kind of a deeper dive into risk factors, longevity, health span, lifespan, genetic factors, all of those things. It must be refreshing for you to be able to, do what you want to do now in practice, and actually live with, have the mission, have purpose. Now, I'm curious what your guys is like. What are the next steps for you in business?
Yeah, I mean, we just started, so but offering the best service we can, and being able to grow it and accept more clients is the immediate next step. But being able to bring this layer of health span, longevity medicine on top of more folks' medical care is the goal. So being able to bring this out to more folks.
Who are the ideal clients for you, and how can they find more about you guys?
Ideal clients are, somebody who has, kind of heard that call to action enough times that they're ready to cross that threshold and go after what they want. People who really want to understand this and ready to make a change and do this. That's the best experience. That's where we have magic here. We have a website, preamble.co. They can get in contact with us through there. We'll be taking new patients probably sometime after the first of the year.
We will have your contact info in the show notes below. So if you guys are interested in getting in touch with Dr. Greer and his team, finding out more about the services that he offers, I'm curious, do you do any long distance clients, or is it all local to Arizona right now?
Yeah, it's all local to Arizona. We do some long distance clients. They'll fly in here for a consult, and then we'll keep in touch from there. But we're licensed in a few other states, so we do that a little bit. We'll probably do a lot more in the future, though.
Dude, thank you.
Yeah,
very
thanks
much
for having me on. That was a great talk. I enjoyed it.
It's great to connect with like-minded people. I'm glad to have you in our network. I'm looking forward to collaborating more with you in the future, and having this conversation again soon. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks for making the time, and we'll talk soon, brother.
All right, you too, Ben. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this content valuable, here are 4 ways I can help you in your nutrition journey for free. 1. Grab a free copy of my Fat Loss Fix Guide at fatlossfixguide.com. 2. Join my free group at smartnutritionmadesimple.com. 3. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at smartnutritionmadesimpletv.com. 4. Leave a 5-star rating and positive review so that we can gain access to more nutrition experts ready to share their knowledge with you and ultimately help more people make smart nutrition simple.